I think it's right on the dot, on the hour, that we can resume now the plenary discussion. So, just a couple of quick housekeeping remarks that I will make. Please, we have lots and lots and lots of speakers, and we only have today. We have to finish everything by this evening. So please do stick to the 3 minutes so that we can accommodate as many as we can. And I won't repeat anymore all that I said yesterday, or maybe I will. Please, this is a humanitarian meeting. Don't politicize. You behaved very well yesterday. Let's keep it like that, because really it is more useful for everybody if we stick to the nature and the quality of the meeting as was done yesterday. I found that in spite of this, we are condemned to this virtual mode, but let's make the most out of it. I thought there was quite a lot of energy and good exchanges in spite of our distance. Let's keep it like that. So the first speaker, so to say, of the series today is actually a short video, I'm told, which was shared with us by Uniqlo. Uniqlo is a private sector partner in Japan, so we will watch that short video to begin with.
世界中で本当に困っている人、誰かっていうことを考えたときに、やはりそれは難民の方々ですよね。莫大な数の人々がその日の生活も困ってるし、その中で子供が多くて、特に子供ですよね。これやはり将来があるんで、その人たちの将来がなんと我々の力だけでは本当に小さいんですけど、手助けしたい。困ってる人がいたからっていうので。
Questo lavoro mi piace, tutto faccio in casa, sistemare l'item, anche in camerino, ti aiutava i clienti, così il mio futuro adesso, thank God, io sono un'altra vita.
Wonderful video, little video. Fast Retailing and Uniqlo are indeed one of our most active partners, and CEO Mr. Yanai is a rather extraordinary person. I want to pay tribute to his commitment after having watched that. We have another recorded statement now by Mr. James Gilling, Humanitarian Coordinator at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia.
Hello, my name is James Gilling and I'm the Humanitarian Coordinator here at Australia's Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Now, I'm very pleased to be coming together with high-level officials, meeting with states and stakeholders, and most importantly with refugees themselves, to reaffirm our shared commitment to the Global Compact on Refugees. Australia is committed to supporting a functioning global asylum system and improving settlement and integration outcomes for refugees in partnership with UNHCR. As a leader in the provision of settlement services for newly arrived refugees, Australia is pleased to make a new pledge to support implementation of the Global Compact in the spirit of global responsibility sharing and in solidarity with generous host countries. We commit to support other member states, at their request, to establish or refine refugee resettlement programs through the sharing of our experience and expertise with a view to ensuring refugees can successfully integrate in their new society. This includes sharing our experience as we continue to grow opportunities for community groups and businesses to directly support settlement and integration efforts. Australia has a proud history of helping those most in need. We remain committed to being a generous refugee resettlement country and to offering resettlement to the most vulnerable, including women and children. Australia supports strategies to expand complementary pathways for refugee admission. Australia's Skilled Refugee Pilot Labour Agreement, started in July 2021, provides an alternative pathway for refugees to resettle in Australia. This program is a practical example of how businesses and business leaders can harness refugees' talents to address skills shortages. Australia's Community Support Program enables communities and businesses, families and individuals to sponsor humanitarian visa applicants with employment prospects and provide support to new humanitarian arrivals in their settlement journey. Australia has made a significant commitment to supporting countries of first asylum, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. Our multi-year and largely unearmarked funding to protracted crisis displacement ensures our partners have the flexibility to direct funding according to need and operational priorities, including in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, where we have provided more than $270 million in humanitarian assistance since 2017 to support Rohingya and host communities. Protection of the most vulnerable persons is critical, and we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. In line with our Global Refugee Forum pledges, Australia remains committed to enhancing the participation and agency of women and girls in refugee and host communities, to preventing sexual and gender-based violence, to working to ensure education for refugees is accessible, inclusive and high quality, and to breaking down barriers that prevent people with disabilities from participating in and benefiting from humanitarian action. Finally, Australia acknowledges that the meaningful participation of refugees and refugee-led organisations in decision-making, including organisations led by women and people with disabilities, is an essential element of a whole-of-society response to refugee crises and to successful implementation of the Global Compact. High Commissioner, we take this opportunity to thank UNHCR for its unwavering commitment to serving the most vulnerable in ever more complex circumstances. Thank you.
With many thanks to Australia, we now move to the next statement. It's my great pleasure to introduce the Assistant Minister and Director General for International Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, Mr. Atsushi Ueno. You have the floor.
Good morning, High Commissioner Grandi, and I'm so sorry I can't come to Geneva and meet with you face to face. And I also appreciate that you showed a video by Uniqlo, and we really appreciate the collaboration between UNHCR and Uniqlo. But anyway, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all those who worked to organize today's meeting, especially to the colleagues of UNHCR and the government of Switzerland who played a crucial role. It is timely to hold this meeting, particularly when the number of refugees and forcibly displaced persons in the world is projected to reach a record high of 84 million. I hope this meeting will provide an opportunity to review the process of the pledges made at the first GRF and deepen discussions on issues that require further support for the next GRF. The first thing I would like to report about Japan is that the success of the refugee teams at the Olympic and the Paralympic Games in Tokyo has raised public awareness of issues surrounding refugees and their protection. Their participation in the Tokyo Games once again demonstrated to the world that the participation of refugees in sports events can promote physical and mental care, social acceptance, and peaceful coexistence with the host society. I want to express my gratitude again to all those involved in making the refugee team's participation in the Tokyo 2020 Games possible, and to High Commissioner Grandi for your active involvement in the Games, including your participation in the opening ceremony and warm encouragement you sent to the refugee teams. Japan is working to achieve the goals of the Global Compact on Refugees based on the belief that supporting refugees and resolving various issues faced by them is essential for promoting peace, enhancing conflict prevention, and realizing human security. To alleviate the burden on host communities and support the self-reliance of refugees, Japan is promoting projects based on the humanitarian development peace nexus approach in partnership with UNHCR and other international organizations and NGOs. Specifically, these projects have been successful in Uganda, Zambia, Sierra Leone, and other countries. In addition, Japan is extending the scholarship program that accepts Syrian students to Japan and is also promoting the acceptance of refugees settled in third countries. One area that needs further support for the next GRF is the realization of equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. Japan, along with other countries, has led the establishment of the COVAX facility, pledged a total of US $1 billion to the facility, and has provided approximately 30 million doses of vaccines so far. Japan will provide up to approximately 60 million doses of vaccine in total. Japan understands that climate change is one of the factors that lead to unwanted migration and recognizes the importance of addressing this issue. At the COP26, Japan announced to double its assistance in climate adaptation over the next 5 years up to 2025, and to provide $14.8 billion in public and private assistance, including adaptation assistance. Japan will continue to support the GCR to achieve its goals in cooperation with the UNHCR and other partners. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ueno-san, for your personal commitment and support, and of course, for Japan's partnership with UNHCR. The next statement is a recorded statement by Ambassador Haifa Abu-Ghazaleh, who is Assistant Secretary General of the League of Arab States and head of their social affairs sector.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Arab region is facing numerous challenges as a result of the events and developments happening in the world, which exacerbated the refugee and displacement crisis. COVID-19 pandemic has also added burdens that worsen the general humanitarian situation in crisis locations. The Arab region is currently handling the greatest responsibility in hosting refugees, since it is a source, transit, and target region. In fact, it hosts approximately half of the number of the refugees in the world, which lays additional pressure and doubled burdens on economic and social systems in host countries. The League of Arab States is sparing no effort in increasing the efficiency of the responses to all needs of refugees and displaced in order to guarantee access to health services in the refugee context. The League of Arab States is also upholding refugee rights to education which is including them in educational systems, especially amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The support of government officials from Arab states is one of the main pillars of the work of the League of Arab States in supporting capacities to deal with the refugee issues in cooperation with the UNHCR and endorsed by the Council and committees of the League of Arab States. Some of the strategies are the following: the Arab strategy to protect children in refugee situation, the Arab strategy to prevent and respond to countering all sorts of violence in refugee situations, especially sexual violence against women and girls, the Arab strategy about making general health services available in refugee contexts in the Arab region. I'd like to seize the opportunity of participating in this important meeting to showcase the most prominent main messages that resulted from the regional deliberations of the Global Compact on Refugees held in cooperation between the LAS and UNHCR on the 10th of November 2021. These deliberations contain three main priority causes for the Arab region, and these priorities would form a roadmap for the countries of the region to work on accelerating the pace of the activation of the Global Compact on refugees. The causes are the following: one, supporting refugees through working on implementing the pledges made by Arab countries in the framework of the first Global Refugee Forum, giving attention to the needs of the most vulnerable, facilitating the access of refugees to educational and health services, promoting access of refugees to technical and vocational training, to supporting host countries and communities through reiterating the international solidarity with host countries, reiterating the importance of increasing the support allocated to Arab host countries, encouraging joint planning among actors in humanitarian action. 3, promoting partnership and encouraging multi-stakeholder approach through reiterating the importance of following the multi-stakeholder approach and encouraging partnerships, facilitating and supporting the role of international, regional, and civil society organizations. Finally, reiterating the importance of collective efforts exerted by all relevant parties. Thank you for your attention.
Thanking the Arab League for their statement. I now give the floor to the Director General for Multilateral and Global Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs of Croatia, Ambassador Mato Skrabalo.
Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner. It was a great privilege for me to participate at the first Global Compact on Refugees 2 years ago, and I'm also pleased for being able to participate live in this meeting today. In December 2019, the world was a different place, not yet aware of the full extent of the new viral disease. Today, we are still learning how to adapt to this new normal, but fortunately, the world did not forget about the importance of international cooperation and solidarity, as well as the need for a multilateral global response. The first GCR paved the way towards the improvement of lives of refugees and host communities that received them with unfailing delivery of aid. And we should all express our sincere gratitude to the UNHCR and member states for their commitment. Croatia's reception and protection system of refugees, which we nurtured since the 1990s, is well known. We are working on creating inclusive, multi-stakeholder partnerships in order to truly transform the lives of refugees. During the first GCR, Croatia announced 3 pledges that stress the importance of self-reliance of refugees through education, empowerment of women, protection of members of vulnerable groups, in particular women, children, and people with disabilities. As one of the 7 countries that's co-sponsored the thematic group Jobs and Livelihoods, Croatia continued to promote its top priorities outlined in our National Strategy for Development Aid. In 2019, together with the UN Women, we initiated a project in Lebanon worth 200,000 euros to build women's resilience through promoting their economic empowerment. This project targeted 110 women, Syrian and Palestinian refugees, and vulnerable Lebanon nationals, provided them with high quality and market-based ICT skills training, and supported their access to temporary or full-time employment at the local market. The project was successfully concluded this year. Regarding education, our flagship project done in collaboration with UNICEF in Jordan aimed to provide safe and adequate learning conditions in refugee camps Azraq and Zaatari. Within this project, worth 200,000 euros, 5 inclusive playgrounds with access for children with physical disabilities were built, and they provided protective environment to learn and play for almost 9,000 children. This project will also conclude this year on 31st of October. Both of these pledges, with its respective projects, are part of Croatia's broader 5-year pledge to assist Syrian refugees announced in 2016 at the London conference. Thus far, we have donated 600,000 euros to help alleviate the increased humanitarian needs of the Syrian people with the aim to provide sustainable solutions with long-term impact. Finally, in the scope of our third GCR pledge regarding the program of resettlement of applicants for international protection, Croatia fulfilled its commitment and enabled the reception of 250 Syrian refugees from Turkey. Moreover, the Croatian government expanded its initial plan and adopted a decision to resettle additional 100 refugees from Turkey and made available the possibility to relocate, as a matter of solidarity, 50 applicants for international protection from other EU member states, which face increased burden immigration. To conclude, I believe that these examples clearly demonstrate that even in times of pressing challenges, Croatia stands firmly committed to providing assistance to refugees, in particular by addressing root causes and creating conditions in countries of origin for voluntary return of refugees in safety and in dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Skraballo, and thanks to Croatia. I now give the floor to Ms. Emilia Saiz, who's Secretary General of the organization United Cities and Local Governments. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, for this opportunity, and greetings to all ambassadors, delegates, and partners and friends that are gathering around this implementation of the Global Compact. We would like to stress, as World Organization of Local and Regional Governments with over 250,000 members around the world, how much hope we have put in the implementation of the Global Compact. It truly represents the political will and ambition of not only the international community, but of local people all over the world to strengthen cooperation and solidarity to address this issue, not only as an issue of humanitarian need, but as an issue of humanity. We feel that however you look at this issue, you will see that the effects are most heavily felt at local level. If we want to ease the pressures of host countries, if we want to expand the access to service provision and the self-reliance of refugees, we will need to work with the local level. There is no single sphere of government that can address this alone, but we need to do this together. And in order to do that, local and regional governments need to have a seat at the table to define national and international priorities. But above all, we need to together shift the narrative. We really welcome this perception and this approach. Being a refugee is not a condition, it's just a circumstance. But we go even further. Being a refugee does not mean that you are not a neighbor and that you shouldn't be accessing the same type of service provision than any other person in our communities. And this is why we feel that not only we need to enhance our pledges, and we are doing that with our call to actions through our coordination mechanisms. Since our Congress in Durban in 2019, over 100 good practices have been submitted to the GCR dashboard, but over 50 pledges are also included there. And you might have heard the experience yesterday of our member, the mayor of Gaziantep, and the work of the Global Task Force on Migration, and our call to ensure that we change relationships of refugees with national legislation in general. We need to offer the same services, and in order to do that, we need enhanced competencies, we need a different type of investment, but above all, we need to work together. And my constituency is here today with you, through me, to express our full commitment to shift the narrative with you, to enforce and to promote solidarity, and in particular to think with you how the best service provision can be provided at local level. Beyond the concept of citizenship, we need to ensure integration, access to water, to health, to education, to basic services, but also to work, because work is part and parcel of a better life, of a livelihood. We'll need to address this if we want to enhance participation and avoid discrimination. We are ready to work with you towards the next steps. And we hope to contribute to the shift of narrative through our Lampedusa Charter, which we are calling for dignity, equity, recognition, and participation. We are in your hands to move further with our pledges and to implement the call for action. Thank you very much, High Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Ms. Saiz. I couldn't agree more. A lot of what we talk about actually happens at the local level. So I think that we need to even further strengthen partnerships, interaction with the cities and local governments. So thank you very much. And now for another very interesting perspective, we'll hear from Marc-André Buchwalder, who is the CEO of the SCORT Foundation, and he's also the co-convener of the Coalition of Sports for Refugees. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues. In 2019, at the first Global Refugee Forum, more than 80 entities from diverse directions like professional and grassroots sports clubs, civil society organizations, governments, national and international sporting federations came together, pledging to use sport to improve the lives of refugees. The Sport for Refugees Coalition is now convened by the Olympic Refuge Foundation, the UNHCR, and the SCORT Foundation, as you just said. However, the pandemic initially caused sport activities globally to be halted, affecting particularly refugees and other displaced populations. As the health crisis continues through 2021 and beyond, there is an increased desire and appreciation for all that sport and physical activity stands for. Innovative approaches to securing access to sport, whether delivered online or in person, provided a vital distraction to the daily stresses all around us. It further highlighted the role sport plays in promoting mental health and psychosocial well-being, especially in times of crisis. Despite the challenges that the pandemic has created, the coalition members are committed to finding innovative ways to deliver on its pledges. One, to promote and ensure access for all refugees, without distinction of any kind, to safe and inclusive sporting facilities. Two, to increase availability and access to organized sports and sports-based initiatives for refugees and hosting communities, actively considering age, gender, ability, and other diversity needs. Three, to promote and facilitate equal access to and participation of refugees in sporting events and competitions at all levels. Moving forward, the coalition will seek to harness opportunities to establish cross-sectoral partnerships beyond the traditional sports organizations. Partnerships that can unlock new resources, promote greater collaboration, help overcome obstacles, and enable more refugees to get access to and benefit from sport. This could be reflected in forms of joint pledges or new pledges at the next GRF in 2023. We are committed to working with the global humanitarian community to play our part in making the pledges of the Global Compact on Refugees a reality, so that everyone has access to sport, improving social cohesion, inclusion, self-reliance, and psychosocial well-being, and ultimately improve the quality of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these important remarks, Mr. Buchwalder. We're very committed to strengthening partnerships in the area of sports, of course, for all the reasons you mentioned. we are now going to listen to another recorded statement by the Director General for International Organizations in the Foreign Ministry of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Wook-Ching Chang.
Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner. I'd like to thank the UNHCR and the Swiss government for holding this important meeting. This year means a lot to both Korea and UNHCR because it marks the 30th anniversary of Korea's membership in the United Nations, as well as the 70th anniversary of 1951 Refugee Convention. In this monumental year, Korea is very pleased to reaffirm Korea's commitment as a responsible member of international community to continue to participate in the strengthened cooperation and solidarity as stated in the GCR. In 2019, Korea made 6 pledges for the period of 4 years. As it is halfway through the period, I'd like to share the progress in 3 broad categories of the objectives of GCR. First, Korea has put significant efforts into 2 objectives of the GCR regarding host countries and countries of origin in order to share the burden and responsibility of international community. The 3 pledges of Korea are especially related to these objectives. Korea has contributed $90.7 million to the country-based pooled funds which supports conflict-affected regions such as Yemen and Syria, so that Korea's pledge to continue and expand its humanitarian assistance to refugees could target their specific situations. Humanitarian crisis and sexual violence are indivisible problems in countries of origin. In order to fulfill its pledge to prevent and respond to sexual violence in conflict, Korea has contributed $8.6 million to gender-based violence projects and Global Survivors Fund to tackle gender-based violence, which amounts to 72% of the $12 million it pledged. Also, I'd like to emphasize that we need more donors. Under the joint pledge with civil society, which is to strengthen cooperation in addressing refugee issues, my government has implemented the GCR through a whole-of-society approach with multiple partners. The government formed a regular communication channel with NGOs and has also endeavored to support civil society projects more. Civil society also has seen achievements such as expansion of their programs for refugees. Thus, truly, we are cooperating as Team Korea. Second, the pledge of Korea to expand refugee support under the Humanitarian Assistance, Development, and Peace Nexus strategy is highly relevant to the objective of the GCR to enhance self-reliance of refugees. To integrate refugees into host countries' socio-economic activities and improve their self-reliance, Korea has already contributed $37.7 million to relevant multilateral development cooperation projects, which amounts to 75.4% of the $50 million it pledged. Third, our 2 pledges are relevant to the objective of the GCR to expand access to third countries. Although Korea is not one of the major destinations for refugees, Korea is making efforts to create more favorable conditions. Korea, the second Asian country to launch a pilot resettlement program, has received 17 refugees in 2020 following its pledge to accept refugees for resettlement. Korea will continue to take small yet steady steps towards its achievement. Furthermore, I am pleased to inform you that the pledge to strengthen the national capacity for protecting refugees is completed. Korea established a separate division under the Ministry of Justice dedicated to evaluation of refugee applications, just as promised. Beyond the pledges already made, Korea will always keep in mind the essence of the GCR, which is to help the vulnerable in need of protection. Even though they may not fit into the strict definition of refugee, Korea does not ignore their needs. Korea received almost 400 Afghanistans through the Operation Miracles. It also granted special permits to stay to Myanmar and Afghan nationals in Korea on humanitarian grounds. If I may quote, "Will is power," Korean government will continue to engage in the issues of refugees with firm commitment moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the Republic of Korea. I now give the floor to the permanent representative of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia at the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador Abdelaziz Al-Wasil. Ambassador, you have the floor.
سعادة المفوض السامي السيد فيليبو جراندي.
High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to take this opportunity to express my esteem and the esteem of my country for the efforts that you are deploying and those who work in UNHCR in order to implement the goals of the GCR and to shed the light on the efforts to face the challenges and fill the gaps. And to support the or to re-enhance the support given to the refugees. Here we are united and we have to remain like this always. Our responsibilities, joint responsibilities, is what is going to change the landscape and the sufferings of the refugees, especially those who need our constructive work in order to improve their livelihoods and to bring hopes. We have to work for their future and contribute to their dreams and bring more hope to their life. High Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you that the efforts to treat the crisis of refugees need to target the root causes and to take measures to solve the conflicts and the causes of conflicts and wars. This is the responsibility of the international community, and there are a lot of responsibilities that need to be assumed in order to eradicate the root causes that behind a refugee crisis for a safe return and a dignified return for the refugees. Let's not forget also the pandemic that complicated the situation of the refugees and contributed to the confusion of the response plans. The United Kingdom, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is working in order to support all the efforts for the stability and advance and prosperity of societies. High Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, my country is contributing to a lot of the efforts that are being deployed to tackle the crisis of refugees, and we are proud to be one of the biggest donors in the humanitarian sector, and we are one of the biggest donor in the UNHCR. This role comes while the kingdom is aware of the importance of its role in enhancing peace and stability and contributing to the international effort and solidarity to solve the problems that are undermining peace in the world and the projects of development and prosperity. In addition to that, despite all the economic challenges in the world, the Kingdom continued to assume its role, and it's a humanitarian role. The Kingdom is the biggest donor for humanitarian aid on the regional level, and also one of the biggest at the international level. For the refugees and displaced, specifically, my country hosted a big number of refugees, more than 1 million refugees, and provided care for them and opportunities of healthcare, treatment, and education, in addition to help a number of host countries to share burdens and responsibilities with them. And we contributed to infrastructure, schools, hospitals, shelter, and food programs in a number of refugee camps around the world to contribute to alleviate their sufferings by providing basic needs. Finally, I would like to reiterate and extend my thanks to and wish you success in your work. Hopefully, it will have an efficient role in solving the crisis of refugees and displaced around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for all the contributions of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which you mentioned, very important. I am now giving the floor to Mr. Pervez Ahmed Junejo, who is the Federal Secretary of the Ministry of States and Frontier Regions, Ministry Saffron of Pakistan. You have the floor, Secretary.
Thank you. Co-conveners of the high-level officials meeting, High Commissioner for Refugees, Excellencies, Pakistan, as one of the co-conveners of the Global Refugee Forum and one of the largest and longest host of refugees, attaches high importance to this high-level officials meeting. As a catalyst for support platform, the global landscape in its economic, social, and public health dimension has changed in fundamental ways in the past 2 years. Refugees and displaced persons are not immune from the devastating effects of COVID-19. Pledges of GRF have helped in easing the additional burden and generated a modicum of support. However, humanitarian needs far exceeded the available resources. The GCR indicator report has shown a decline in durable solutions, particularly in regard to resettlements and voluntary repatriation. The quantum of ODA's disbursements for countries of origin was minimal. These developments are reminders of the need for enhanced investments in finding durable solutions. This means deployment of diplomatic, political, and development tools to prevent and resolve conflicts. The wide-ranging economic and social effects of COVID pandemic have also drawn home the imperative of investing in prevention and preparedness. Targeted support for refugee hosting countries in specific sectors of education, health, shelter, energy, and infrastructure helps in alleviating poverty among refugees as well as host communities. Such support needs to be enhanced. Excellencies, the role of investments in the context of humanitarian development peace nexus is critical to building sustainable peace. There is a need for investing in countries of origin and creating conducive conditions for voluntary returns through a range of coordinated actions along political, security, and development tracks. In Afghanistan, we are witnessing a humanitarian catastrophe in the making. The UN has already informed the international community about severe potential risks. Millions are at high risk of dying from hunger and lack of shelter if timely humanitarian assistance does not reach them. According to World Food Programme, around 22.8 million people, more than half of the population of Afghanistan, face acute food shortages. Around 3.4 million people are internally displaced, 2.2 million are registered refugees in the neighboring countries, and a similar number of unregistered around the world. This is not simply a crisis for or inside Afghanistan. Left unaddressed, it will be a major driver of displacement and a strong barrier to voluntary repatriation. Timely, collective, and coordinated actions are needed to avert this looming crisis. Pakistan has taken a number of steps to help avert this humanitarian calamity, including through bilateral assistance to the tune of $33 million, facilitating cross-border and transit trade arrangements, as well as evacuation and facilitating air and land bridges for supply of international humanitarian assistance. Later this week, Pakistan is hosting an extraordinary ministerial meeting of the OIC to further mobilize and scale up humanitarian assistance for the people of Afghanistan. As we respond to the situation of internally displaced and other segments of population in Afghanistan, let's not lose track of the issues of existing lot of refugees. For this, Regional Refugee Response Plan led by UNHCR is a positive development. We hope that while keeping in view the concerns of refugees and host countries, it will help to respond to issues of gaps in facilities, developments of host communities and countries by facilitating returning refugees financially through legal processes and by providing information which may help them. Excellencies, enhanced international assistance and solidarity can be powerful catalysts to operationalize the principles of burden and responsibility sharing. They are critical to saving millions of displaced people from a life of misery and hardship. I thank you.
Many thanks. Message very loud and clear about the predicament in which neighboring countries are being put by the situation in Afghanistan, and I hope that this meeting will serve also as a forum to highlight the importance of continuing to support you and others and to address the root causes of or prevent the rise of a new humanitarian crisis. Voy a dar la palabra ahora a la señora Mercedes Alonso Fraile del Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores de España. Usted tiene la palabra.
Gracias. Señor Alto Comisionado, queridos colegas, España se comprometió con el Pacto Global para los Refugiados desde su inicio y desde entonces.
Mr. Director. We have committed ourselves to the Global Compact on Refugees and have begun a series of policies aimed at that same end. We have suffered from the consequences of many crises on our borders, and this is why I would like to share a few figures to begin with. In 2020, despite the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, we went above 116 requests for international asylum, a large percentage of which came from Latin America. We are the third country in European ranking for number of requests. We began a national plan for the implementation of the Global Compact, which will cover many of the issues that we already face, both externally and internally. Spain is currently drawing this document up. We have already begun implementing many measures. Domestically, we have, among other things, begun a structural reform of our asylum office so that it can act more quickly. This effort has, from 2019 to 2020, to take on, well, grant over 80,000 permits for temporary residency. We've decided to assume our responsibilities and show solidarity. For this is why in the last few years we have slowly increased our contributions to UNHCR. In the Conference of Solidarity with the Venezuelan migrants this year, we have promised additional funds in addition to the pledges made at for a total of over 100 million euros. by 2024. Now, Spain presided the MIRAPS platform last year and began many different programs. Among these training programs to help Central American countries deal with the refugee crisis. It was a solidarity event in June where we were able to collect more than 116 million euros. In Pakistan, we helped the evacuation of 2,000 Afghans, and 20 million euros have been promised as humanitarian aid for immediate needs of the civilian population of Afghanistan. We recognize the important efforts of neighboring countries, and we can support them as well. For Syria, over 59 million euros were dedicated for assistance to refugees. All of these efforts are completed with other instruments. First of all, our humanitarian action decided to adopt sexual diversity, gender politics, and other new considerations. And its basic lines have to do with protection of refugees. All of these actions, both within and without Spain, allow us to move towards the achievement of the global compact's objectives. I'd like to thank you and UNHCR for their assistance to Spain. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a usted, señora Alonso Fraile.
Thank you, Madam Alonso Fraile.
Muchas gracias, España, por su contribución.
And Spain for its contribution.
Give the floor to the chief of the RSD department in the State Migration Service of Azerbaijan, Ms. Edan Seyedova. You have the floor.
Thank you, High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start by thanking the UNHCR and as well as all the other participants for organizing this meeting and for making it together successful. The importance of international responsibility sharing is one of the key objectives of the Global Compact for Refugees. First of all, the burden of diverse refugee problems must be shared among all stakeholders and governments involved in this process. And secondly, we must
Ms. Seyedova, sorry to interrupt you. The sound here is not good. I don't know what it sounds online. Let me see if there's anything we can do about that. There's nothing we can do about that. It's a little bit, it's not very clear. I hope that those online can hear. Here in the room is a bit, but go ahead and we will, if not, you can also maybe circulate it in writing so we have your statement. Sorry about that. Sorry for interruption. Please continue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner. Countless and tremendous efforts by the international community have been and still being exhausted toward the solution of the problems of refugees, but yet we are still far from the happy end. Numbers are growing, needs are escalating, but unfortunately, measures and endeavors fail to catch up with refugee influx. The situation still demands paramount steps to be taken by the states directly and indirectly affected by these processes. Azerbaijan, as a true supporter of Global Compact on Refugees, and due to its historical background, fully understands complexity of the protracted refugee situations and acknowledges struggle by the state receiving large refugee population. As a state which faced a huge refugee crisis in the first years of its independence, we cannot underestimate support and role of international humanitarian organizations in tackling shared challenges caused by this phenomenon. We appreciate assistance of international humanitarian organizations, in particular UNHCR, who supported us in overcoming this humanitarian catastrophe emerged during that time. Since then, Azerbaijan enjoys excellent cooperation with UNHCR as a key partner of the government in safeguarding rights of people of concern. The organization has been providing direct assistance to persons in need who eventually found refuge in our country. It should be also pointed out that after liberation of Azerbaijani lands in Karabakh from 30-year-long occupation, the opportunities for Azerbaijani refugees and IDPs to return their homelands became possible, and many important actions are taken by government in this direction in order to accelerate their return. And international organizations have to show support and contribute in this process as well. It is in the world's singular interest, best interest, and it is right to ensure that people who desperately need a new home, whether in or beyond the boundaries of their own country, can actually find a place to live in safety with food, medicine, school, and the time to plan for what comes next. While mutual cooperation and solidarity are the key elements for success, we believe that added value of multiculturalism is also an important aspect in tackling problems of refugees. As a country which sets a unique example of multiculturalism, Azerbaijan highlights the importance of respect to cultural diversity. We fight against xenophobia. We know that resources and potential of the states are uneven and financially most effective tools to address common challenges. But we also acknowledge the importance of sharing best practices and lessons learned in order to be more prepared to emerging challenges. At the first Global Forum on Refugees held in Geneva, the Azerbaijani government voiced 3 commitments, and these commitments were fully implemented. One of these obligations was the issue of granting legal labor rights to persons under the protection of the UNHCR office in Azerbaijan. They were given access to obtain a personal identification number, enter into an employment contract, and those were given the legal right to work. Another obligation is to annually cover the costs of education of a person who has received refugee status in our country at a higher educational institution. It should be noted that the training costs of 2 refugee students enrolled in higher education institution registered with the government are covered by the respective educational institution. In general, the rights of asylum seekers and refugees and their family members to education, which is one of the main privileges, are fully ensured in Azerbaijan. The third obligation was to include persons who receive refugee status in Azerbaijan to the compulsory health insurance system. One of the important steps taken by our government was the introduction of appropriate changes to the legislative and legal framework of the country in the field of including refugees, asylum seekers, and persons of concern to UNHCR in the national health insurance system, together with the citizens of Azerbaijan. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I wish to remind everyone that no single country or organization can solve refugee and conflict issues alone. Members of the international community must come together. And in this regard, it is vital that every state to understand and take its responsibility in support of those willing to create peaceful and harmonious societies. We do hope that our joint response to the needs of the large number of distressed human beings who have taken great risks to arrive at our countries will in many ways define our beliefs, values, and indeed who we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you and to Azerbaijan, Ms. Seidova. I am told that those online heard very well, so that's the important part. I now give the floor to Dr. Sonia Grit, who will speak on behalf of Education International. You have the floor.
Thank you, High Commissioner. We are grateful for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. Distinguished delegates, as many of you noted, education is a fundamental human right, and with children accounting for 42% of all forcibly displaced people, it is central to the fulfillment of the Compact's objectives. As a global union federation representing more than 32 million educators, Education International champions equitable and free access to quality and inclusive public education for all refugee children and youth. As a member of the GRF Education Co-Sponsorship Alliance, we have been working with partners to further the inclusion of refugees in public education and monitor achievements in that area over the past years. Though we welcome the progress documented in the first GCR indicator report, we are concerned about the 1.8 million refugee children that remain out of school. That is in addition to the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on the most vulnerable in education, including refugees and in particular girls. Education International and affiliates around the world have been calling on governments to conduct educational equity audits in order to inform recovery plans and help address, in particular, the exacerbated inequities facing refugee students and educators as a result of the pandemic. Such equity audits are most effective when they are planned, designed, and implemented through a participatory and collaborative process. Teachers, education personnel, and their unions are best placed to assess the impact of this unprecedented crisis on students and help design solutions for a rapid and inclusive recovery and education. As we explore ways of expanding support for refugees, ensuring meaningful and constant dialogue with social partners is crucial. Earlier this year, Education International hosted a large forum bringing together representatives of teacher unions, civil society, policymakers, and the UN to discuss the challenges faced by the forcibly displaced in Africa and in other parts of the world in the context of the pandemic. Finally, teachers are the cornerstone of quality inclusive education. As highlighted in the previous panel, the lack of qualified teachers is a major challenge. While numerous pledges were made in relation to education, few of them specifically focus on teachers. According to an analysis conducted by the GRF Primary Task Team, only 3 out of 41 pledges covering primary education actually focus on teachers. As we identify gaps and areas in need of further support in preparation for the next Global Refugee Forum, we must step up efforts to support teachers and invest in the recruitment, retention, training, deployment, terms of employment, and working conditions of teachers in crisis and refugee hosting contexts. Government must recognize the qualifications of refugee teachers and ensure that they have an opportunity to pursue their teaching career under the same terms and conditions as their local peers. Dear colleagues, education unions have mobilized to help teachers navigate the challenges posed by the pandemic and mitigate its impact on the most vulnerable students through numerous initiatives. We are committed to continue collaborating with all stakeholders to advance the right to education and access to decent work for all refugees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Grete, and thank you for your very important point that we probably don't hear enough about regarding teachers. This is very well understood and heard. We'll certainly follow up on that. I now give the floor to the Chief Director of Asylum Seeker Management in the Department of Home Affairs of South Africa, Mandla Madumisa. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairperson, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and delegates, my delegation appreciates the opportunity to attend, albeit the virtual, this first high-level officials meeting on the implementation of the pledges and commitments made at the first Global Refugee Forum in 2019. We thank UNHCR, members, states, and all those who have contributed towards the progress that has been made in the implementation of the pledges. The partnerships that have been developed and strengthened over the past 2 years, we echo the observation made in the report, and that there is the ever-increasing need to do more to ensure the protection of persons of concern in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and resources constraints. It is through such partnerships and burden and responsibility sharing that we can ensure enhanced protection of asylum seekers, refugees, and other persons of concern. Chairperson, I wish to draw your attention to this area that over the past 2 years, and despite the challenges posed by the pandemic, much has been done to ensure enhanced protection for asylum seekers and refugees and others in need of international protection in South Africa, drawing on our constitutional values of humanity, dignity, and equality. In this regard, I'm pleased to report on the progress made in relation to the pledges that South Africa has made in 2019. The first pledge on the two pledges that we have made is with regard to the pledges related to the refugee status determinations as a backlog elimination project and aimed at resolving the backlog in refugee status determination and promotion of durable solution for deserving refugees and asylum seekers. In this regard, South Africa has made following progress towards this pledge. One, we have appointed 31 members of the Appeals Authority, and in addition, 24 staff members, especially to deal with the backlog at this level. We are pleased to announce that phase one of the project has been successfully completed. Training and ongoing development is taking place. Asylum seekers awaiting appeal can be reached electronically, and refugee status determination continue virtually. With regard to promotion of durable solutions, specifically for the backlog cases, the review of heritage as well as backlog cases that could be considered for durable solutions have started already, and further consultation in this area continues, and we will report in due course as part of the reporting cycle. The second pledge relates to regard to the increasing protection capacity by promoting civil registration and related documentation in order to ensure that South African nationals and refugees have access to documentation. This pledge relates to the issuing of refugee ID smart cards as well as travel documents to ensure that refugees through modernized as well as secure documentation platform at selected departmental offices across the country, aiming to bring these services closer to where refugees reside. The rollout of this new solution is envisaged to be completed by 2024 in line with the timelines of the forum. Whilst the refugees who qualify for identity documents will continue receiving the current ID documents under the Refugee Act, the pledge is meant to issue refugees with refugee smart cards and travel documents using modern and secure technologies and within the proximity of their stay to reduce the need to travel to refugees. In this area, Chairperson, our progress is as follows. The development and testing of secured system solution have been finalized. The first batch of refugee ID smart cards have been issued, have been secured. Consultations are currently underway before we can move to the piloting phase. The target has been affected by the pandemic, but we remain on course to meet the intended deadline of 2024. It is important that I highlight that this pledge is also aimed at benefiting South Africans who have never registered at birth during the apartheid years. In an effort to prevent statelessness, the government has issued many with late birth registration and also introduced an electronic registration and policy that requires parents to register their newborn babies within 30 days from birth. In this regard, South Africa encourages birth registration immediately at health facilities. In order to achieve this, mobile units to capture civil registration in rural and not easily accessible areas are being used. One of the challenges associated with civil registration is that government is able to register birth of children who are willfully presented for registration. Various outreach programs will continue to be implemented to ensure increased registration of births, thus reducing the number of late birth registration. And legislative amendments and updates have also been made to the South African Citizenship Act aimed at addressing potential statelessness. Chairperson, South Africa had also been operating under the national state of disaster due to the pandemic. However, we had introduced an online extension system which, as from the April 2021, to ensure qualifying asylum seekers and refugees require requests for extension of their permits without having to physically present themselves at refugee centers. As of 8 September 2021, my country had been able to renew 24,333 refugee permits and 69,000 asylum seeker permits through the online platform, which constitute around 47% of the active cases. In this regard, we continue to engage more persons to utilize this solution in order to ensure that they are in possession of secured document. In conclusion, Chairperson, South Africa remains committed to deliver on the pledges made to strengthen cooperation with other member states, UNHCR and other partners towards realizing the objectives of the Global Compact of Refugees and thus ensuring protection of refugees, asylum seekers, and other persons of concern. I submit, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Director, and many thanks to South Africa for its important role in these issues. Je donne maintenant la parole au représentant.
I will now give the floor to the permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations in Geneva. Ambassador Swalem, you have the floor. So, thank you, Mr. High Commissioner, and thank you for the Office of the High Commissioner and Switzerland for having organized this meeting 2 years after we held the first forum, before reviewing the progress that we have achieved and highlighting the difficulties that we continue to face. Our second forum is held in the context of a constant increase in the number of displaced persons and an increase in vulnerability due to COVID-19. The aim of this approach is to foster the reinforcement of solidarity and international cooperation. We have made considerable progress since 2019. We would like to echo the report on the indicators recently published by UNHCR, which informs of the need to intensify efforts in order to ease the heavy burden which weighs on the host countries due to the protracted refugee situations and the emergency situations. Is it necessary to remind you that burden sharing and responsibility sharing will only genuinely be achieved if there is a better balance between hosting and the search for durable solutions? These solutions are a sine qua non, without which any status quo will be, any solution will be reduced to an unbearable sine qua non. Algeria has always been a land of hospitality and of justice and dignity. My country intends to maintain its responsibilities and to keep up this tradition in keeping with the Global Compact. On the strength of this tradition, Algeria will make considerable efforts to guarantee protection and assistance to the displaced persons in the Sahel, to urban Syrian refugees, and to refugees from the Western Sahara, and which is the #1 protracted refugee situation under the mandate of UNHCR. In the current context, access to health services, healthcare services, and education is the priority for our action aimed at Sahrawi refugees. School attendance in the Tindouf camp is 100%, and a large number of these young people attend secondary education institutions. My country has decided to allocate the equivalent of the sum of $100,000 to improve the school environment and to reinforce the COVID-19 vaccination campaign in the Tindouf camp. I would like to conclude by reminding you that the regions themselves are best able to talk about their own situation and needs and expectations and aspirations. That's why my country exhorts the Office of the High Commissioner to ensure better representation of refugees' situations by means of a more inclusive and more transparent approach when it comes to their participation in the meetings and fora that concern them. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you, Algeria, for the commitment you have just announced to us.
Sorry. Yes. I now give the floor to Ms. Laura Tulia Lehtinen, who is the Humanitarian Director in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland. You have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The Global Refugee Forum of 2019 was a milestone in many respects. First of its kind, it demonstrated the international community's response to forced displacement, a challenge that is global by nature. The following 2 years have turned out to be quite different than expected. The global pandemic changed the landscape dramatically and has still not eased its grip on us. We have also seen shocking evidence of the climate change becoming reality in front of us and not being just a distant threat. In the big picture, we are on the right track, but at the same time, serious challenges remain as the number of displaced persons is projected to reach 100 million in 2022. In the midst of this, Global Refugee Forum has shown its value in the implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees. Progress has been achieved on many fronts. As the recent indicator report shows, we are closer towards the objectives of GCR than 2 years ago. To name but a few examples, more official development assistance is being allocated to refugee situations. More refugees have access to decent work, education, or freedom of movement, and more refugees have received durable solutions. At GRF, Finland announced 3 national pledges: to strengthen UNHCR's capacity on disability inclusion, to increase the resettlement quota, and to increase humanitarian funding. Today, we are pleased to say that all of these pledges have been implemented. However, our work continues along the same priorities. We continue to provide predictable quality funding to UNHCR, and we are exploring ways to further support UNHCR in its efforts to mainstream disability inclusion in its work. We highly value the strong focus UNHCR has on participation by persons with disabilities in decision-making and community leadership processes. We wish to congratulate other member states and organizations that have progressed with their pledges and show appreciation to refugee hosting countries and communities for their invaluable role. As humanitarian financing struggles to keep pace with growing needs, we welcome UNHCR's increasing attention to private sector financing, which has yielded good results. We also encourage other states to join the challenge if they are not yet donors to UNHCR or providers of durable solutions. At the same time, we need to continue fighting any phenomena countering the spirit of Global Compact on refugees and humanitarian action in our countries, such as hostility, xenophobia, or discrimination against refugees. Similarly, any kind of instrumentalization of displaced persons should have absolutely no place. What we need in the current global situation is more solidarity and more tolerance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Director. Thank you also for Finland's very staunch support to the cause of refugees and to UNHCR. I now give the floor to the First Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Georgia, Ekaterina Dzhebwadze. You have the floor.
Hello, distinguished guests, dear High Commissioner. At this outset, I would like to welcome first our high-level officials meeting that give us an excellent opportunity to take stock of our efforts in the first Global Refugee Forum and discuss possible ways how to advance towards achievement of the GCR objectives. Let me herewith stress the importance of UNHCR's assistance to member states in this process. Not being a legal binding document for states, Georgia considered GCR as a commitment and express of the political will of states to resolve the refugees crisis. Excellencies, during recent years, Georgia has rapidly strengthened its legislative and institutional framework on asylum. In this time of the COVID-19, Georgia has successfully adapted with the changed circumstances. Asylum seekers, refugees, and humanitarian status holders in Georgia continue to benefit from the state universal healthcare programs to enjoy the right to education and labor right. New unified strategy of education and science for the upcoming decade dwell on the 3 pillars: equal, quality, and governance in accordance with the legislation enforced in the country, access to education, is guaranteed for refugees and humanitarian status holders. In 2019, the first GRF government of Georgia took a voluntary pledge in the direction of ensuring better access to education for refugees and humanitarian status holders. It encompassed enhancement of already existing guarantees, as well as working on a new type of opportunity on all levels of education. Despite the challenges caused by COVID-19 pandemic, we acknowledge the importance of the pledge, reiterate our commitment to its implementation, and continue working on improving the education opportunity for refugees and humanitarian status holders in order to contribute to better integration in the society. In this content of the pandemic, the Office of the Public Defender of Georgia actively continue working on improving the human rights situation of migrants, asylum seekers, persons with international protections, and stateless persons. Let me note that flag takes during the first GRF in 2019 related to the preparation of the subchapter on asylum and monitoring of status determination of process for persons with international protection have been implemented. With this pandemic, only the process for determining the status of stateless person is being monitored. As you are aware, Georgia has its own difficulty with regard to the forced displacement. Unfortunately, IDP and refugees is expelled by the Russian Federation as a result of multiple waves of ethnic cleansing for Georgian occupied region and still unable to return their homes. While the government of Georgia continues its effort to protect the right of IDPs and provide them with a decent accommodation until they are voluntary, safe, and dignity return to their place of origin, regrettably, Russia's occupation of Georgia, Abkhazia, and Tskhinvali region prevent us from extending protection to the population remaining on the other side of the occupation line. We even aim the outbreak of the pandemic. The list of human rights violations goes long, posing an imminent threat of the new wave of forced displacement. In this regard, let me recall the judgment of ECHR that legally established the responsibility of Russia. The authority exercises effective control over the region for the violation of the right of IDP and refugees returning to their home, and concluded that it has an obligation to enable inhabitants of the Georgian origin to return their respective homes. Dear Commissioner, in conclusion, we reiterate our full support to the Office of the United Nations High Commission of Refugees in its endeavors of alleviate the flood of millions of refugees, asylum seekers, internal displaced, and stateless persons around the world. We extend our heartfelt appreciation to UNHCR for trustworthy partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Je donne maintenant la parole à la représentante.
I now give the floor to the representative, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Burkina Faso at the United Nations in Geneva, Elianina Min. I give you the floor, Madam. Thank you, High Commissioner. Thank you for giving me the floor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, participants. We would like to thank the HCR for convening this important meeting. Despite the difficult context caused by COVID-19 and the varying conflicts, 2 years ago, at the first World Forum on Refugees, And the forum in March 2018, we were able to reaffirm our desire to participate in following a resolution to the forced displacement of people through a certain number of commitments. My country undertook a number of commitments including promoting implementation of tripartite agreements with a framework of voluntary repatriations involving the countries of asylum and origin and UNHCR. We promoted local solutions favoring the inclusion of internally displaced persons and refugees in development programs. And we promoted access to civil registration for refugees, internally displaced persons, and host populations without discrimination based on gender and age. Along the same lines, my country also made 3 other commitments during the high-level segment on statelessness, and these were to reform the law on nationality and civil science in order to correct the legal gaps that can be a source of statelessness, as in the study, and to enact a law on the status of stateless person in connection with Action 6 of the Global Plan of Action, and to set up a procedure for determining the statute of statelessness in Burkina Faso. Mr. President, the government of Burkina Faso, in virtue of its international commitments, is striving to translate these processes into concrete actions for the support of its partners. Pertaining to our commitments to the World Forum, we have forged ahead in many ways, including holding 11 sessions of meetings of the Tripartite Commission, and including forced displaced populations and national development problems and programs such as the Social Safety Net Project and the Sahel Emergency Program. With regard to the commitments on statelessness, 2 drafters were prepared respectively on nationality and registration, as well as on stateless status. These draft laws were validated by a technical verification committee. Furthermore, a technical note on the establishment of a procedure for the determination of stateless person status was drafted. We've also revised the decree relating to the attributions of the National Commission for Refugees, CONAREF, now tasked with determining stateless status. In addition, within the framework of the Bamako process, as an offshoot of the regional dialogue on protection and solutions to the forced displacement of populations in the Sahel, held in September 11th and 12th in Bamako, 2019 in Bamako, we adopted on September 28th, 2021 in Ouagadougou, its action plan, and we welcome these advances. Mr. President, despite all these aforementioned gains, Burkina Faso still faces enormous challenges, which include challenges related to achieving inclusive economic and social development, security challenges linked to terrorism, and the challenges of social cohesion, protection, and assistance to populations. The humanitarian situation remains one of great concern to our country, as it is in the rest of the sub-region. Burkina Faso alone has approximately 1,423,000 internally displaced persons as of August 2021. And this situation exacerbates the risks. And that is why the risks of statelessness. And that is why, on behalf of my government, I call on all our bilateral and multilaterals to continue their efforts to help Burkina Faso. In closing, I would like to convey our recognition and gratitude to the government of Burkina Faso, to all humanitarian actors, especially the High Commissioner, for his personal and continuous involvement. I particularly salute the representation of the United Nations High Commissioner for the Refugees in Burkina Faso for the efforts made and the support provided to the government in managing the humanitarian crisis, preventing statelessness, and the fight against COVID-19. As I reaffirm our attachment to multilateralism and international cooperation, I also express the hope that our combined efforts may contribute to a better future for displaced persons forced into a world of peace and security. I thank you.
Désolé d'avoir mal indiqué votre nom tout à l'heure. Vous êtes bien l'ambassadeur Traoré. Et merci pour votre...
I apologize for badly pronouncing your name. You are Ambassador Traoré. And I thank you for your statement. And I look forward. I enjoyed my trip to your region. I hope to be able to return there in near future.
There is The recorded statement, I'm sorry, a recorded statement by Mr. Miroslav Zekovic, Director General for Admin Affairs, Citizenship and Foreigners at the Ministry of Interior of Montenegro.
Ekscelencije, dame i gospodo, zadovoljstvo mi je obratiti se danas u ime Crne Gore. Uvjeren sam da je ovo prilika da predstavim izazove u oblasti međunarodne zaštite izbjeglica sa kojim se Crna Gora uspješno suočava, buduće planove i izazove na implementaciji preporuka i obećanja koje je Crna Gora dala tokom prvog globalnog foruma za izbjeglice. Crna Gora kontinuirano preduzima aktivnosti kako bi održala efikasan režim zaštite kroz harmonizaciju sa dobrom praksom Europske unije, te u tom kontekstu naglašavam ostvarenu bilateralnu saradnju na izradi mape puta na dvogodišnji period sa EASO, čiji je cilj unapređenje zaštite za strance koji traže međunarodnu zaštitu u Crnoj Gori u skladu sa zajedničkim europskim sistemom azila i praksom država članica EU koji je potpisan 2. decembra u Sloveniji. U cilju punog poštovanja prava lica iz ovog sistema i međunarodnih standarda iz ove oblasti, intenzivirane su aktivnosti na proširenju smještajnih kapaciteta za prihvat stranaca koji traže međunarodnu zaštitu. Crna Gora je nastavila da radi na stvaranju okruženja pogodnog za potpuno društveno-ekonomsku integraciju izbjeglica, koji kroz djelotvoran pristup jezičkim kursevima, zapošljavanju, obrazovanju, zdravstvenoj i socijalnoj zaštiti i da osigura da niko ne bude izostavljen, a sve u skladu sa Agendom 2030. Također, apsolutno podržavamo regionalne napore na ojačanju sistema azila i saradnju sa relevantnim međunarodnim subjektima. Na inicijativu Crne Gore održan je regionalni online događaj o sistemu azila i migracija sa fokusom na aktuelne trendove i izazove migracione politike, sistema azila u Europi, pouke iz 2015. 2016. novi pakt o migraciji i azilu, politiku spoljne migracije EU i migracione politike Zapadnog Balkana i EU. Ovo je bila prilika za razmjenu iskustava između institucija Zapadnog Balkana o migracijama i azilu i daljem potencijalu o regionalnoj saradnji. U narednom periodu poseban izazov bit će uspostavljanje elektronske baze podataka koji bi predstavljali unapređen sistem identifikacije, registracije i prikupljanje podataka za lica i sistema međunarodne zaštite, te u okviru instrumenta za predpristupnu pomoć IPA 2 Frontex koordiniše sprovođenje projekta tehničke pomoći sa glavnim ciljem da se pruži podrška razvoju IT sistema za identifikaciju i registraciju mješovitih migracionih tokova. Na kraju želim vas uvjeriti da u spremnost Crne Gore da doprinose realizaciji svih obećanja i čvrsto vjerujemo da će intenzivirane aktivnosti dodatno doprinijeti unapređenju ovog sistema. Hvala.
Montenegro for their statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Veneranda Ingabire, coordinator of the Single Project Implementation Unit at the Ministry in charge of Emergency Management of Rwanda. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Excellency High Commissioner, distinguished delegates, greetings from Rwanda. The government of Rwanda made 9 pledges at the Global Refugee Forum, building upon the 4-area commitment made at Leaders Summit in 2016 that focused on graduating camp-based refugees out of assistance programs and increasing access to work opportunities as part of joint livelihood strategy. The second commitment was ensuring that 100% of refugees have valid refugee identity card issued by the government of Rwanda. The third was integrating 100% of refugees, students in secondary school and 50% in primary school into national education system. The fourth one was ensuring that 100% of urban refugees will have the opportunity to buy into national health insurance systems. Those were 4 commitments made at the Leaders Summit in 2016. So GRIF pledges build upon those commitments and focus on livelihood opportunities through joint agriculture project for host communities and refugees by expansion of tea pledges so that 30% of workforce could comprise of refugees and host communities, improving the quality of education provided, and then provide skills development at TVET schools and create a link to market needs. The other one was on youth empowerment and health, so that health can be integrated into the health system, education system, health systems at national level. Those were commitment made at GRIF level. So as of today, the progress, I'm going here to present the progress. In education, I'm pleased to say that 90% of refugee students are integrated into national education system as of today. And a number of 108 classrooms have been constructed to improve learning environment and the quality of education. Again, we have construction activities that are ongoing, where we have construction activities for 210 additional classrooms that will host refugees and host communities in the area that hosting refugees. On jobs and livelihood, the government of Rwanda made available more than 93 hectares of land at district level to develop joint agriculture project. This is building upon the success of the DC's project that has been done at one of the districts that is hosting a refugee camp in Gisagara, where 1,883 beneficiaries benefited. Among those beneficiaries, 40% were refugees and 60% are host communities. 40% refugees and 60% host community. So we are duplicating this successful project into other districts hosting refugee camps. Again, Youth Connect in Rwanda in this year 2021 is currently underway. And more than 200 refugees, youth from camps and urban areas are participating. On this process, 100 of refugees will be selected to be awarded in this Youth Connect. On energy and environment, in 2020, over 82,000 trees were planted and 608 meters of retaining walls have been constructed in refugee camps and surrounding communities. Again, relocation of families from high-risk zones because of environment degradation in refugee camps is ongoing, where one of the camps is being relocated to a safer place in Mahama refugee camp. 50% of all refugees have shifted from the use of biomass as source of energy and have access to LPG gas for cooking. This is a very good achievement, and thank you to UNHCR for supporting this initiative. On health, we are happy to communicate that 85% of urban refugees are currently enrolled in a community-based health initiative, CBHI, which is a national system, and now opened for urban refugees and students in boarding schools. Again, screening and treatment at hepatitis B and C have been rolled out in Congolese refugee camps and now implemented in other refugee camps. As of today, 78% of refugees aged 15 years and above have been screened, and for those who have been infected are being treated as nationals. About commitment on statelessness, we have now a national statelessness task force that has been established and full functional, and the national action plan to eradicate statelessness in Rwanda is operationalized and pledges pledges at high level. Again, on this one, a new national law have been gazetted in July 2021, and the law contains an article for acquisition of nationality on ground as one of the statelessness eradication measures. Refugees and host communities are benefiting from this one. As of today, now we have a new national centralized integration system where it is being linked with health management systems and national population registry. Refugees and host communities are benefiting from this one.
Sorry, Ms. Inkabire, we need to wrap up as soon as possible because we have a lot of other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency.
Oh, please finish. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Excellency. As the main area of concerns, we have been impacted by COVID restrictions, and funding for pledges is still an issue. So this is the issue to be considered in the new future plannings. Thank you so much to UNHCR and partners who contributed a lot on the above mentioned realization. I thank you so much.
Thank you, and apologies again, but our list is big and the time is becoming tight. But thank you for your statement and for Rwanda's contribution. The Deputy High Commissioner just visited Rwanda and came back with very, very positive report of all the advances, and you have described many. So thank you. I now give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative and Chargé d'Affaires at the Permanent Mission of Thailand at the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador Rongvudi Virabutra. You have the floor.
Thank you, High Commissioners. On behalf of my delegations, I wish to thank UNHCR, the Swiss Confederations, and the co-convener for organizing this important meeting to take stock on the achievement made in GCR implementation and to identify way forward. Despite clear evidence of progress shown in the GCR indicator report launched just last month, many challenges remain, such as lack of sufficient funding to support refugee and host community, increased number of conflicts worldwide that force more people to flee, and limited places for resettlement. All are compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. This only underscores the growing needs of displaced persons that require greater collective efforts to address. Chairpersons, although Thailand is not party to the 1951 Refugee Conventions, we have long been committed to our humanitarian tradition, place importance on addressing root cause in country of origins, and been providing protections and assistance needed to displaced persons residing in the countries. These include the access to treatments and vaccination for all displaced persons in the context of COVID-19. Thailand continues to fully support GCR and remain committed to its implementation, including through pledges made during the first Global Refugee Forums. While the majority of pledges are in implementation stage, we wish to highlight some key progress as follows. First, Thailand continues to host over 77,000 Myanmar displaced persons for almost 40 years now. Thailand and Myanmar have been working closely on their return in a safe, voluntary, dignified, and sustainable manner to the established mechanisms, resulting in a total of 1,039 returnees to date. Although this bilateral mechanism on the repatriation has been stalled by the pandemic and political situation in Myanmar, Thailand will continue to cooperate with the relevant parties in order to find sustainable solutions. Second, Through the national screening mechanisms soon to be operationalized, people in need for protection will be granted legal status to temporarily stay in Thailand, as well as right to access basic services necessary for dignified livelihood. UNHCR has been playing a vital role in capacity building for officials in this regard. Third, Thailand has adopted a whole of society and whole of government approach and has been working relentlessly on alternative to detention for children in immigration detention center and ensuring its effective application through the MOU on no child detentions and its SOP. In addition, we will continue to work to tackling and advocating for the eradication of statelessness. Chairpersons, over the past few days, we have heard that much more needs to be done. It's also clear that partnership and cooperation are key in effective address these issues, and that has be human face to it, key in making a real difference to human life. Looking ahead, only when we do our part, we can then achieve a genuine, equitable burden and responsibility sharing. Thailand stands ready to work with our partners in this common endeavor. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thanks for all the support of the Royal Thai government to UNHCR. I do appreciate that the difficult situation in Myanmar is making the whole discussion on solutions difficult. And we heard this as well yesterday from Bangladesh, so something we need to continue to follow up. I now give the floor to Ms. Nura Jawish. She's a volunteer with the Turkish Red Crescent and will speak on behalf of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, IFRC. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Hi, Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies welcomes and commends the inclusive approach by UNHCR in organizing this high-level officials meeting, in particular their outreach and engagement with civil societies organizations and refugees. This is why I am speaking here on behalf of IFRC. My name is Noura. I am an international relations student at Ege University of Izmir and a Turkish Red Crescent volunteer based in Izmir, and I am a refugee from Syria. I have lived in Turkey since 2014 with my family. We decided to move from Syria to Turkey when I was 13 years old after one major event. One day I was at the school and we had an exam and they dropped a bomb in our school while we were having the exam. I was so scared and my heart was beating so fast I could have died on that day. Not only me, but all the students in our school. I cannot forget that day and the feelings which I felt on that day. After this day, my father decided that we will move to Turkey. When we got to the border of Turkey, I felt a strange feeling. I thought it was a dangerous moment for us. I was afraid, sad, and confused. When we first arrived to our new country, it was not easy. I had to work at a young age because we needed money. Those days were very bad for me because I wanted to go to school. But I didn't give up. I learned Turkish, and in 2016, I was able to go back to school and complete my education. Today, I have a very different life. In 2018, when I was at high school, a Turkish Red Crescent Community Center opened, and one group of Red Crescent workers visited our school to give us information about the center. The Turkish Red Crescent is one of 192 national societies that are members of the IFRC. Each national society provides life-saving humanitarian aid, including to refugees and migrants and other displaced people, through a total of 14 million volunteers. These volunteers working locally in their communities. In 110 countries, Red Cross and Red Crescent societies are supporting people on the move, on a needs-based approach, and the largest group supported are asylum seekers and refugees at the local level. And at that moment, I decided to become one of these volunteers. I received training on volunteering, and since this day, I have done a lot of things in the center. We made wonderful things together. I organized seminars about the foreigner students exam in Turkey, which is a very important exam for students who want to study at Turkish university. I also supported different activity as translator for refugees who cannot understand Turkish. Also, I supported giving information about COVID-19 and access to vaccines and social cohesion activities. I wanted to raise 2 points today. My first point is about promoting refugee participation in decision-making process, including international meetings like this, but also within organizations providing service to refugees. Refugees have so much to offer, and we need to recognize that vital contributions that refugees themselves can make to society. For me, volunteering is very important because it makes me feel that I am an effective person that can make differences in societies. As a refugee, I think volunteering is kind of giving back, and it also helped me to be a part of the social and cultural life in Turkey and to improve my Turkish. If I had a chance to say something to other refugees, I will tell them to become a volunteer, because we should make differences for this world and for people who need help. My second point is about vital role of local organizations, including refugee-led and host community-led organizations, and their valuable role in meetings needs of refugees and ensure that their rights are respected. The Global Compact of Refugees recommends support to strengthen institutional capacities at the local level, including through funding and capacity development. From my perspective, I think that local organizations and institutions play a big role in refugee lives, especially when it comes to giving information about rights or offering long-term solutions. My dream is making myself useful in the world and for all people who need help, especially refugees like me. I want to stand for them to have a peaceful and improved way of life and to integrate it into society. On behalf of IFRC, thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you, Noura. And you really deserve a big applause. And I wish we were all here in person. But congratulations to the IFRC for having asked you to be the person speaking on their behalf. They are, of course, a very close partner of ours and engage in many refugee responses. But congratulations to you for sharing your experience. I do hope that when I come to Turkey next, I'll have the privilege of meeting with you. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ambassador Zorica Bukinac, Department of Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Assistance of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Commissioner Grandi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak at the first high-level officials meeting. And firstly, I would like to reconfirm the support of my country to the Global Compact on Refugees, as well as to the UNHCR and its office. In the second half of 2021, Slovenia holds the presidency to the EU Council, and in this role, Slovenia placed water at the center of its program. It resulted in the EU Council conclusions on water in the EU's external action, adopted this November. Water and sanitation measures in any displacement situation are the first line of defense. So, on 6th of December, the permanent mission of Slovenia in Geneva, the EU and World Meteorological Organization organized an event, Water and Displacement, to raise awareness of the link between water and displacement. We would like to thank UNHCR Special Advisor on Climate Action, Andrew Harper, for participating at that event. One of the priorities of our presidency is the area of digitalization in the humanitarian context. We have applied this topic to the issue of underfunded and protracted crisis, which happen to be predominantly crisis of forced displacement. We produced also concrete recommendations for an effective and responsible use of digital tools in this context. We have strongly advocated for the triple nexus and the need for an increased coherence between the humanitarian assistance and development aid. Together with all member states, in the latest Council conclusions on humanitarian assistance, we are committed to bridging the humanitarian funding gap. However, also more efforts need to be on the side of prevention and root causes of forced displacement. We intend to continue with our water agenda since it is a key aspect of the climate change that has to be factored in the humanitarian and development aid. At the national level of engagement, since the last report, in the past 2 years, Slovenia has significantly increased its share of funds for humanitarian assistance to refugees, as well as to hosting communities and their resilience. We try to move to predictable multi-year contributions whenever possible. These funds are implemented through international organizations for assistance to refugees and hosting communities in the Middle East, Afghanistan, neighboring countries, Venezuela, or Western Balkan routes. We focus on women and children. We continue to respond to calls for additional funds for emerging crises, such as the one in Afghanistan, where we pledged 430,000 euros of new contributions for this multi-layered crisis. In the same period, at the national level, we have focused particularly on education of refugee children and their integration into our national school system. The Global Compact on Refugees Indicator report states that tangible progress has been made towards some of the objectives, but shows that more equitable and predictable burden and responsibility sharing is needed. However, we should not be discouraged. It shows that progress is possible. We are firm in our belief that positive outcomes can only be secured through multilateral cooperation and mutually beneficial partnerships among all stakeholders. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thanks to Slovenia for its statement and support. I now give the floor to the Honorable Festus Logan, who is the Executive Director of LRRC, the Refugee Agency of Liberia. Mr. Director, you have the floor.
Thank you, Excellency. Filippo Grandi, High Commissioner for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. I bring greetings from the Republic of Liberia. In 2019, I participated in the Refugee Forum and made 4 pledges, ranging from education and health, job livelihood, protection capacity, the multi-year, multi-partner local integration strategy. We are pleased to present to this body progress made with those pledges. Pledge 1, the inclusive education policy to enable education management and delivery services to respond to the diverse needs of refugees learners. Progress. Refugees children are now enrolled in all various schools in the settlement, while the Ministry of Education national curriculum is enforced. The targeted number of 2,000 refugees and host community school-going children in both primary and high school in county hosting refugees are well achieved. Pledge 2, the inclusion of Liberia workers, UNHCR sponsors Liberia workers into the government of Liberia payroll will be done progressively, subject to the availability of funds as anticipated in time. Progress made. The government of Liberia has incorporated qualified Liberian refugees, Liberians and refugees professional educational personnel into the government of Liberia payroll and is currently providing oversight to raise education, inclusion of the education management information system, ensuring supply of school materials. Currently, the Liberian government has incorporated some teachers and health workers into the government payroll, are providing voluntary services and sponsored by the UNHCR. Pledge 2 has to do with PVEST program. We want to report here that the government of Liberia, due to some challenges in forms, not been able to achieve this pledge. Job and livelihood. Pledge 3, the creation of jobs and provision of livelihood. Progress made. The government of Liberia has ensured over the years that skilled refugees had issued work permits to enable them to secure jobs and learned and earned that livelihood. Pledge 4, access to land for local integrating Ivorian refugees to aid in the socio-economic integration into Liberia. Progress made. The government of Liberia, with support from the UNHCR, has secured 1,011.13 acres of land in 3 of our counties hosting refugees, construction of shelters, and for agricultural purpose. Your Excellencies, we are pleased to inform you that shelters have been built, while 80% of refugees are now, and 2% of the host community are now benefiting from those shelters have been built. Currently, there are ongoing construction of shelters in one of our refugee consecrated counties. The implementation of the local integration strategy 2019-2023. Our pledge 5. The government of Liberia's commitment to the implementation of the multi-year, multi-partner local integration strategy of 2019 and 2023 for local and social economic rights of Ivorian Liberia. In line with the National Development Plan, the Proposed Agenda for Prosperity and Development, the PAP, based on the current laws and regulations such as the land right laws, the government of Liberia has negotiated with the host community and local authorities for the provision of land for agricultural activities, which will contribute to the improvement of food security and economic activities, as well as cater to the housing needs of integrated refugees. The government of Liberia is committed to implement the multi-year and multi-partner local integration strategy of 2019 and 2023 is well on course. Your Excellency, the government of Liberia has created a condition for the full implementation of the local integration strategy. Protection capacity are pledge 6. Laws and policies to improve refugee access to rights and services, including documentation to aid sustainable local integration program. Progress made. The government of Liberia have established a corridor to continue the engagement with all relevant stakeholders involved with the harmonization, the passage of all relevant laws and policies to provide protection capacity for all refugees. Your Excellency, Liberia is pleased to inform you that indeed refugees have a right as compared to the host community. So details of this commitment was made in every section of the ESCOM in Geneva in 2019. There are also ongoing efforts by the government of Liberia to ensure that the commitments and the contribution made are realized. Protection capacity continues. The government of Liberia, with support from the UNHCR, has reviewed and finalized the amendment of existing national laws and policies such as the 1993 Liberia Refugee Act, the 1974 Alien and Nationality Law, the adoption of the RDP laws, the statelessness action plans, the incorporation of refugees in the National Human Rights Action Plan. All integrated refugee has access to civil documentation. such as the national ID cards, work and residence
Mr. Logan, apologies to interrupt. You need to bring your statement as soon as possible to a conclusion, please. Sorry.
Thank you.
No, you can finish, please.
Okay. Okay.
But try to finish quickly because we're running out of time.
Okay. That's the last one. With the issue of resident permits, resident permits and all legal documentation and with the law integration, we will ask the UNHCR that's already working to facilitate these efforts as refugees have opted to locally integrate into Liberia. We also want to say that the government has worked with the UNHCR to repatriate over 18,000 Ivorian refugees in the Republic of Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for interrupting. Indeed, your statement is important. We have declared a cessation clause for Ivorian refugees, so cooperation of countries in your region is extremely important to bring this process to a successful conclusion. We always talk about crisis, but for once there, we're talking about a solution. So thank you very much, Mr. Logan. And now, je donne maintenant la parole à l'ambassadeur Omar Sniber, représentant permanent du Royaume du Maroc auprès des Nations Unies à Genève. Ambassadeur, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs. Je voudrais tout d'abord féliciter le Haut-Commissariat pour l'excellente organisation de cette réunion et cette table ronde.
First of all, I would like to congratulate the High Commissioner on the excellent organization of this meeting, particularly for the Global Forum on Refugees. I would like to thank the panelists for their extremely interesting contributions. Our delegation notes with concern the growing situation of forcible displacement and the increasing number of populations that need assistance, humanitarian assistance. 85% of these people are accommodated in developing countries. Faced with this alarming situation, we invite international donors to contribute generously to humanitarian issues and to contribute to responsibility sharing. We salute the publication of the report on global indicators. My delegation insists on the role of international cooperation, which is necessary in order to come up with joint responses. The various countries share an enormous number of challenges and concerns. I would like to reiterate the commitment of the Kingdom of Morocco to the defense of the rights and situation of refugees, and especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to stress the partnership between both public and private institutions in Morocco with UNHCR when it comes to the implementation of the Global Compact and the forum held 2 years ago in Geneva. This strategy was adopted in 2014, and it is steeped in the founding principles of humanitarian assistance in order to provide the persons concerned with the protection that they are entitled to, and to regularize the situation of thousands of people in order to improve their access to education, vocational training, general education, and to form cooperatives and have access to health care. True to its constant position, Morocco has participated in the first global forum, while providing its support to various institutions and putting in place emergency plans. It is absolutely essential to review the needs of refugees in order to be able to meet their needs properly. Morocco has decided to contribute $300,000 to the UNHCR this year. The aim of this contribution was to support registration and documentation operations in the context of the implementation of the Global Compact. In 2020, biometric registration was completed of 10 million people in 75 countries. Before concluding, I would like to deplore the politicization of these processes by the Algerian delegation by constantly instrumentalizing the aspects of this serious situation. This was a very unusual situation under international law. A separatist military grouping is ruling the Western Sahara, and this makes the situation unacceptable to Morocco. And a number of refugees are being held in camps in Western Sahara, under bad conditions, but the international community is extremely aware of this. And Algeria is spending very large sums of money on arming the separatist organization. Thank you, Mr. High Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Kingdom of Morocco.
More statements before we break. First, I'll give the floor to Mr. Armen Ghazarian, Head of the Migration Service in the Ministry of Territorial Administration and Infrastructure of Armenia. You have the floor.
Thank you, High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Armenia has continuously made significant efforts to achieve objectives of the Global Compact on Refugees. We strive to contribute to the solution of the problems of refugees, both at home and internationally. Hence, we have specifically addressed the human rights of refugees and displaced population at large, as well as the root causes of forced displacement and discrimination of its victims. Furthermore, Armenia has done utmost to support the displaced population in times of pandemic. Despite all the challenges we face, the government provided access to COVID-19 vaccination to refugees and other displaced people residing in our country. I deem important to highlight the implementation of the large-scale housing program by the government launched in 2020 by providing housing purchase certificates to refugees. The main goal is to provide voluntary resettlement as a durable solution to the protracted refugee situation for the people displaced from Azerbaijan due to the ethnic cleansing perpetrated in 1988-1992. The second goal is to reduce the vulnerability of that population through providing means for their dignified livelihood. Third goal is the full integration of this population into the Armenian society. More than 250 families have recently received these certificates, out of which 150 have already purchased their new dwellings. The state budget allocation for this purpose is about 12 million USD. Armenia thanks UNHCR for providing operational support in the implementation of this very important project. The government also did its utmost to support the needs of around 22,000 refugees from Syria. Armenia was the third recipient of Syrian refugees per capita among the European states. We were still facing these challenges when a new wave of displacement hit our country in 2020. Due to the war unleashed against Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan, more than 91,000 people were displaced from their homes. More than 40,000 people were deprived of their houses and property. Vital infrastructure was destroyed, including schools and hospitals. Finally, Armenia is convinced that the UN and its bodies should enjoy unconditional, unimpeded, unhindered, and unfettered access to people in need wherever they are and in all circumstances. The extension of humanitarian assistance should in no way or shape undermine the human rights of the affected persons, their safety and dignity, or discriminate them because of their origin, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin or status. I thank you, Mr. High Commissioner, and all the delegates.
Many thanks, Mr. Ghazarian, and many thanks to Armenia for your statement. The last statement of this session, the speaker will be His Eminence Cardinal Michael Czerny, and the Secretary of the Migrants and Refugees section of the Holy See. Eminenza, le do la parola.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, High Commissioner, Excellencies, and distinguished delegates. The Holy See wishes to commend the UNHCR in Switzerland for co-hosting this important high-level official meeting. Although we are connected remotely, I assure you of my personal closeness and above all that of His Holiness Pope Francis. The Holy See would like to begin by reiterating its support for the vision and ambition of the Global Compact on Refugees. 2 years after the first Global Refugee Forum, it is legitimate to ask two simple questions. First, has it improved access to protection for refugees, durable solutions, or equitable burden and responsibility sharing, particularly for host states? Secondly, how has the pandemic affected the achievement of the objectives of the Global Compact? Mr. Chairperson, regarding the second question, it is undeniable that the pandemic has become a crisis of protection and has delayed the achievement of durable solutions. At the same time, it has also helped to call attention to parts of the international protection system that are in need of reinforcement and reform. Thankfully, the Global Compact on Refugees continues to provide possible solutions as well as a forum for their consideration and discussion. However, even with opportunities before us, the danger remains that we become indifferent to the suffering of refugees and countless others as a normal daily occurrence. Overwhelmed by the ever-increasing numbers of those forcibly displaced, it is easy to forget that they are human persons and families in search of safety and peace. Therefore, the new and persistent conflicts and injustices behind the mass exoduses should prompt us toward deeper reflection on their root causes. As Pope Francis recently affirmed during his visit to the Reception and Identification Center in Mytilene, Greece, it is an issue for the whole world, a humanitarian crisis that concerns everyone. The pandemic has had a global impact. It has made us realize that we are all on the same boat. It has made us experience what it means to have identical fears. We have come to understand that the great issues must be faced together, since in today's world, piecemeal solutions are inadequate. This means that we must not look the other way, deny our common humanity, or disregard those who are suffering. Instead, we must shake ourselves from the individualism that excludes others and wakens hearts that are deaf to the needs of our neighbors. Building walls will not bring us any closer to real sustainable solutions. They only exacerbate human suffering and conflict. Eventually, the strategy of externalization will fail, and the crisis we face will be even more difficult to manage. Mr. Chairperson, on the occasion of this high-level meeting, the Holy See wishes to echo Pope Francis's clarion call to stop this shipwreck of civilization, and at the same time, to acknowledge the generosity and solidarity shown by countries that continue to welcome and host displaced persons. This is an essential witness to the way forward, human fraternity and solidarity. It would also be impossible without the close collaboration of civil society, including faith-based organizations, religious communities, and local churches, which have an enduring, stable presence in the field and are often the first to provide protection during emergencies and sustain solutions in their aftermath. We are also grateful to those countries that have made concrete pledges, in particular in increasing resettlement quotas and in ensuring education for young refugees. Prevention, protection, and durable solutions are inevitably interlinked. If one fails, the others cannot deliver. We hope that this high-level officials meeting will contribute to sustain each of these three aspects, translating burden and responsibility sharing into concrete shared solutions. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Your Eminence. And of course, I could not agree more with what you just said. And once again, our heartfelt thanks, gratitude, especially to the Pope for his relentless and very clear advocacy in support of refugees and migrants. This is much appreciated by the whole community. Thank you very much. This brings to an end the session of today. I thank all participants. We will move in 10 minutes to a spotlight session on the role of the Global Compact on Refugees in the medium to long-term response to the pandemic. And this plenary will, please, I am being corrected. The spotlight session will start in 20 minutes at 1340 Geneva time, but the plenary session will start again at 3 p.m. Sharp, I'm being told, sharp Geneva time. Thank you. See you later.